Hi guys, and welcome to the final lesson on the Cinema 4D Introduction course. In this lesson, we're going to do our last exercise, where we'll delve further into the tools that the program offers us. So some things will be similar to the previous exercise, but we'll introduce some new things too, like for example 3D text. We'll be adding some particles, some materials that are a bit more elaborate. In the previous lesson, we learned to add colour to the scene, but we haven't worked in depth on the materials. So we're going to create a scene, a slightly abstract one where we'll add some text, but just to practice all the concepts that we've learned along the course and solidify our base in Cinema 4D. So we're going to start with the text. In Cinema, there's a very easy way to do this, and you'll find it here inside the splines. So when we select this, we get a text. And in this panel, we can adjust the properties of the text. And here is where you can enter the text you want. So I'll put world, for example. You also have the option to change the font, which depends on the fonts you have installed on your own computer. So I'll have a look here and see which one to use. For example, this one, or maybe one that's more simple. So this one is good. Then we have the options to scale the font, the spacing between the letters, the separation, so if you want the letters to be separated or not. Once you've chosen the text and the font, then the next step is to go here to extrude. Place the text inside extrude, and as you see, we've now generated volume on our text. Here in this panel, you have different options too. So here in the caps, you can change what is the beveling of the letters. So we've changed it to fillet cap, and you can see how it changes the letters. You can do the same on the other side too. If you think the letters are too close together, you can go back to the text options, and you can adjust the spacing between them. Now this is one way of creating a text. As you saw, it was really easy and it doesn't take very long either. Now I'm going to explain a little bit more about the particles, and we'll add some to our scene. So go to Simulate, and in Simulate there are a few different options. You have Particles, and in Particles we'll choose the emitter to begin with. What the emitter is this square here that will emit whatever object we decide to associate to it. So I'll place the emitter here. And I'm going to create a small sphere, or some small spheres. I'll then put the sphere inside the emitter. Now if you press play, see what happens. The emitter is shooting out these kind of particles, but there isn't anything associated with it yet. You need to adjust these settings here. For example, when the emission starts, so frame 0, when it finishes, frame 150. In my case, I have 90 frames. So to increase the number of frames, so instead of 90, we want more, then in this box here, just input however many you want. If you look at the timeline, now we have more frames, so now we have 150. We can also choose what speed we want for our particles. So if we increase it, then the particles will shoot out quicker. There are other parameters here too, like the rotation, scale, the variations of the scale, and the speed. If you select Show Objects, you can see the object you created as a particle being emitted. I placed the sphere inside the emitter, so now we can see those spheres being projected. So just play around with these options to see the different effects. Okay, inside the emitter, you can change the way the particles are emitted. You can also change the shape and size of this. So let's make this a little bit longer. And we'll lower it. Okay, now we're going to make a sphere which we'll use to create a planet. It won't be too complicated. What I want to show you is how to work with textures and how through textures we can also create volume. So I'm going to show you something called a height map. First of all, I'm going to make the sphere and place it somewhere here behind. Don't worry too much about how the image looks. This is just an exercise, so you get the hang of the basic tools and functions on the program. So the scene might look a little strange, but don't worry about it. Remember, we're just practicing. So there's our planet. We can add some more segments. We'll also activate this here. I think 50 is fine. Now we'll go down here to create, and from here we'll make the first texture, which we're going to apply to the sphere. First, we'll create a new material, and inside the material, you'll see that by default, the color is activated and also the reflectance. Inside color is where we'll put the color texture, the texture of the planet itself. What I've done is I've found an image online. You can find an image of whatever kind of texture you want your planet to have. And remember that on Freepik, you have lots of resources to choose from. So you could make a moon, Mars, or pretty much whatever you like. And now we have our texture. We can apply this to our sphere. And as you see, it looks like a planet. There's something we can do to this to add volume to our planet instead of it being so flat. And that is to use the height maps I mentioned before. A height map is basically a texture. So the 3D program interprets the black and white areas of that texture to generate volume. So in this case, the white area has more of a relief than the black. So really it's another way of modeling. Only we're getting the volume using a texture instead of directly modeling the object as we've done up to now. So go inside the texture and select Bump. Activate it, and here in Texture we'll select our image. Here we have an option to adjust the strength. I think 20 is fine. And now as you see, what's happened is that the white parts of the image now have a relief. And we've achieved a sense of volume. So let's take a look at the image and see how we now have that volume that we didn't have before. So this is an interesting resource when you're creating textures. We could also play around with some other options, like glow, for example. Glow creates this kind of halo of light around the object. We can also edit the effect. Okay, something like that. Now to apply the texture to this part here, to our text, well, this is something that could also look interesting. So again, create new material. In Cinema, we don't always have to download textures and materials. We also have a library of existing ones to choose from, which is very helpful when you're starting out. So in the Create menu, go to Shader, and here you'll find some default materials. Here you have some more. We could apply a metal, like gold, for example. And you can see how the material would look on the object. And there we go, that's the texture applied onto our text. Remember, we have this activated so that the particles fly out. They could be spaceships. So if the object we used for this, instead of being a sphere, was a spaceship, then it would look like a group of ships flying towards the planet. Let's see something else that's interesting. So, duplicate the text, hide this one here, make this one editable. As you see, now there are a few different layers, and the object has been divided into different parts. To add to the image and make it a bit more interesting, we're going to create something that looks like a room. This will be very simple, so we can just do it very quickly. We'll start with a cube, which will be our room. Okay, then we'll go to Layout and we'll select Modeling. Make this editable. And we're going to make a window. Again, something very simple. So around here, right click, extrude inner, and this will be the window. Okay, just press delete to get rid of the polygon that we cut out. We can also make this longer. Point selection. And stretch it out like this. Okay, so we have this space. Now let's place our elements, and we'll make the image a bit more interesting. Put the text out here. For the moment, we'll leave the emitter more or less around here. And we'll also add a camera that we'll place here inside. Around here. And what we'll do is animate this camera so it goes out of the room towards the planet. To be able to do this, the first thing we need is to make a spline. And this will be the path that the camera takes. So let's go to the top view to see what we're doing. And here you see we have the sphere, the text, the room, the emitter, and the particles. Set the timeline back to 0. So take the pen and create the path. It could go from here around like this. And it's going towards the planet, the sphere. So now we're going to create the camera. First, go back to the perspective view, create the camera. And now we just need to associate the spline to the camera. To do that, right-click. And here, in this part that says Cinema 4D Tags, we'll select this option, which is Align to Spline. And now we need to place the spline in this panel here. In position right now it's 0%, but if we move this, you see that the camera moves on the path. We just need to move the spline up slightly. We need it to go through the window. We'll also adjust the points so that some are lower down and some are higher up. For example, the starting point, we could place it here. This one a bit higher. And the same for the last point. Let's go to the camera view. And see how the camera moves forwards, following the path that we made. If we select tangential, it follows the shape of the path even better. It's quite an exaggerated movement, but it was just to show you how this works. Let's exit the camera. And to finish this exercise, well, the scene, we're going to add a sort of curtain to the window we created. And we'll start with a plane. I'll just hide the room for a moment so we can see what we're doing. And we'll rotate it. Stretch it a little. Okay, so this is going to act as our curtain. It has a few things missing, like a curtain pole, but just for this exercise, this is enough. Now, how do we make this look like a curtain? So we'll go to Simulate, and then to Cloth. Actually, we might do it a different way. So go here to Plane and right-click. And here you have lots of options and tags. But before you apply any of them, remember that you need to make the object editable. Okay, right-click, Tags, and in Tags we'll go to Simulation Tags, where you'll find the cloth. What we've done here is applied physics to the object, so it will have gravity, etc. But how do we make it so that this doesn't fall like it's doing now? Well, we need to hold it up somehow. We need to hold the points up so it stays in place. Well, this isn't very difficult to do. Go to Plane, select the points, and here inside the properties for the cloth tag, there's a tab called Dresser. And select the top points of the plane. And now we'll select this option, Fix Points. Now these points are fixed in their place, so if we press play, the plane doesn't fall to the ground, it stays where it is. We could add a wind effect to make the curtain move as if it were being blown by the wind. So again, very simple. Inside the tag, there's another tab called Forces. You have things like gravity, wind direction, strength, etc. Now, if I increase the strength, look what happens. So obviously I've gone a bit overboard. I can lower these values to get the effect that I'm looking for. Okay, that's looking a bit better. Okay, to make it look even better, we can use a hypernerve again. So put the plane inside it, and now you see it's much more defined. We could also select self-repulsion, which means that if two parts of the curtain touch, they don't join together. So that's this here. You can also select the distance you want between those parts of the curtain. It's a good idea to play around with all these options to see all the different effects that you can achieve. You might wonder if it's possible to apply a similar effect to the spheres from the emitter. So maybe we could apply some wind or turbulence to the spheres coming from the emitter, so they also have some movement along with the curtain. Well, that's also possible. So the wind effect that we made at the moment only applies to the curtain. Now, if we want to apply it to the spheres, then we need to go to Simulate and go to Particles. And here we have various options. We could use a deflector. What this does is create a kind of wall that the balls can't go through. Okay. Let's make it a bit bigger. Now look what happens when the balls hit the wall. But we need the balls to follow a particular direction. So back to Simulate. And here in the effects, we could select, for example, wind. The wind creates a breeze that moves the objects. And here you can adjust the strength and see now that the balls move the other way. Could try a different one. Back to Simulate. And we could choose attractor. Let's try this out. So this attracts the sphere. We could increase the speed. This is very exaggerated, but just so you can see what happens. The balls go towards the attractor. The wind pushes them to the right. The balls can't go through this panel here. And this helps to push them towards the window. If we put another attractor around here, then the spheres go through the window to the outside. Obviously, this could be done a lot more carefully to make it look better. You'd have to adjust all the elements to perfect the scene. But the idea is just for you to see how each of these elements works and what you could use them for. the possibilities of each element. We made a curtain, we added physics to it, we added a wind effect to make it blow, we made an emitter to shoot out particles, and we guided those particles to follow a specific direction. We also created a camera. And we're now going to animate that camera. Let's select this property here. And this is something we can animate. How? We'll go to frame 0. Input 0 in position. Select it by clicking on it. And now we've made a keyframe. Now go to the end of the timeline and move this to the end too. And click again to fix that keyframe. And as you can see, the camera now moves. It's quite an abrupt movement. So we could increase the number of frames, for instance, to 500. You could take this point here, take it to the last frame. So everything moves a little slower. Now it looks much better. Maybe the shape of the spline should be finer or less curved to make it smoother. But all this can be edited and adjusted. Like I said, this is just an introduction to the animation and physics features of the software. So there are many more features to explore. Okay, let's add a texture to the small spheres. We can use one of the default materials that we have in the program. Let's choose a simple one. A metal, this steel one, for instance, and we'll apply that to the sphere in the emitter. Now we can use another material that we'll make ourselves for the curtain. So we'll make a new one, go inside the properties, and in color, remember that we can create textures, among other things. So let's apply an effect. Let's go for this brick, let's say, and see what we get. We get this brick-like texture. And we can use this for the walls of the room, actually, instead of the curtain. In shader, look how many options that we have. You can adjust the scale, the height, the width, and see how it changes. You can even change the colors here, like this. Okay, so as I said, we'll apply this texture to the walls. The problem is that the texture has stretched slightly. So we'll choose another preset that's maybe a bit simpler. I think this stone one is fine. So remove the one we had of the bricks. And we'll now apply this stone, which is going to be much easier for us at this stage. Okay, let's take a look. We can move the text as well around here. So what else can we do? Let's exit the camera. Well, we need to apply a texture to the curtain, which again, we'll do something simple. Let's choose a yellow color. And we're going to make it slightly transparent. Just activate the transparency. And here in brightness, you can put it up or down. And this will make it more or less transparent. And we'll leave it around here. Let's go to this tab here. Now I'm using Cinema 17, so these options depend on which version of the software you have. So if you have 16 onwards, I think, you have the option to add a physical sky. So this generates a sky similar to the one we did in the previous exercise, but it's a bit more complete. The sky itself includes a sun. We can set the time and location. So we'll set it to sometime during nighttime, so it's dark. Okay, because this way the stars will appear automatically. So we've added this physical sky to get a starlit sky. We can also modify the properties of this in this panel here. In sky, there are different options, like the night intensity. You can put it up, you can put it down. You can also select this so that we could see the moon, or we could hide or show the stars. Show any planets there might be. Okay. We're now going to add a light. Move this text around here. Let's go to the camera. Let's see how to add a light to this. I think the one we have gets a bit lost. We could add a light in front, one that's simpler. I'll just exit the camera. I'll take this light and place it here. Lower the intensity. Check that the shadow isn't activated. And we'll do the same for the room. We'll duplicate the light and put it inside the room. Go inside the camera. We could start from here. It doesn't matter that you can't see this part. When we get the image or the video, you can choose at which frame you want it to start at. So you could start from here and follow this path. Finally, we'll adjust the text that we have. We're going to give it an explosion effect. This is something that looks cool, and it's also quite easy to do. So exit the camera. Here we have our word, our text. We want all the word to be joined together. So one way of doing this is going here and selecting connect. And grab the word, place it inside connect. And now we've connected all the word together. Let's take a look at the modifiers. Here you have some really interesting effects, like the explosion, for example. So this effect makes the objects explode. So put the explosion inside a null object. The null object is actually the word. And now you see that the word seems to explode, and it's as easy as that. Go back to the camera. And we want to set the camera so that when we go past the word, more or less at this point, the word explodes. So at this frame, we'll click here to make it a keyframe. And we'll take it up to here. And this is where the word will explode. Click here again. So now, when the camera goes past, this will explode like this. So our exercise is done, and we're now prepared to export it with the adjustments that we want. So render settings and output. We can change the size. So we'll set it to 1080, 25 frames, 72 pixels per inch, and we can save it to the desktop. Call it test. In anti-aliasing, we'll select best. In output, we can also set the frames. So in from, you see it's set at frame 15. But if we select manual, we can adjust this to start and finish where we want. So we could start from 136. And we could finish at frame 400. That way, the video only shows what's in between those frames that we just selected. Finally, we need to activate the global illumination. And we could also activate the ambient occlusion. Let's put this back to here. Okay, what differences are there when the ambient occlusion is activated and when it's not? So now it's activated. The ambient occlusion is the shadow that generates when two objects are close together. So if it's not activated, we won't get that. Or it's not that noticeable. But when it is activated, that shadow between the parts of the wall makes it look a lot more authentic. So if we switch it off, You see it's not that visible. And there you go, it's not as noticeable as it was before. So that's the ambient occlusion. It's something that adds realism to your image, and it's a good idea to use if you want a good quality image. The global illumination is also quite powerful. If this isn't activated, the image doesn't look the same. However, we don't really need these two tools as we're creating a video and animation, so we'll keep them switched off. But just remember that they are there as they're important elements if what you're creating is an image, both the global illumination and the ambient occlusion. So now it's time to render our sequence of images. That's how we're going to get our video. We could just extract the video directly, but the usual way of working is with image sequences. I'll just make a folder here on the desktop. And in save, we'll make sure that our image or the file is saved to that folder and set the format to JPEG. Now, if we select Picture Viewer, we'll see how the image is generated from frame 113 to 400. So we'll leave this to finish the process. And when it's done, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, as you can see, I haven't got the whole sequence as it would take a long time, but you get the idea of what the animation would look like. You could make a shorter animation, so it's not so heavy. But it was good for this exercise so I could explain all the features that we worked with. Okay, so we're all done here. I hope you like this exercise. It's a little different to what we usually do, which is to create a specific image. The idea of this exercise and of the whole course was to introduce you to the basic tools and features of the program and show you how they work by practicing with them. So we learnt to add textures to a model to generate volume with those textures. We learnt to add default materials or presets of the program. We also learnt how to add a physical sky with stars. We made an emitter, and we learnt about particles. We also learnt different effects like the wind effect, the deflector, the attractor, for example. We also added a camera associated to a spline that would follow this path to give us our video. And as an extra, we added that last effect that was the exploding letters. Thanks very much for joining me on this course. If you enjoyed it and you'd like to learn more about Cinema 3D or other 3D software, check out tippad.com for some more courses and tutorials. Also, I'd love to see the images you came up with, which you can upload to the project section of this course. And I'll see you next time. Bye!